couldn't even think. Though I had no idea what this meant, I took it for an answer of sorts that left no doubt there was indeed more to Christ's death than I had ever known or been taught, more perhaps than anyone had ever suspected. Though I did not know what this more could be, it occurred to me that the real tragedy of his death was that nobody really understood it. Though I wanted badly to know, yet nothing followed this experience but complete silence, seemingly a stubborn silence on the part of Christ. While the effect of this experience left me with a subtle assurance I'd someday be privy to this knowledge, a true understanding of Christ's death, I took it for granted this would be only in heaven. She was wrong about that. Reflecting on the argument, I remembered the words, "Many are called, but few are chosen," which meant that despite being called a Christian, I had not really been chosen. Suddenly, this explained everything. While my parents had chosen for me, God had not, which is why I could not understand Christ and why he did not answer. But if I was not a Christian, then what was I? Since my whole life had been inextricably bound up in a Christian life, it seemed to me that if I was not a Christian, then I was absolutely nothing. Once again, I experienced that same dark, unknowable tragedy I had experienced up front. He had, in fact, answered me from the beginning, only I had not understood. This dark tragedy was not his, but mine, all mine. I had not been chosen. I was not privy to the true knowledge of Christ because I was not really a Christian. In short, I was nothing. For a moment I felt poised on the brink of anathema, about to be cast into oblivion. I froze on the spot. The saving grace that broke through this horror was a powerful surge of anger and outrage, the likes of which I had never experienced before. It was so powerful I didn't know what to do with it. Immediately I left the church, slamming its huge door so hard the whole edifice shook and trembled. I hurried away fast, lest the church collapse and I be found in its rubble. I determined never to go back to church again. I didn't belong. It would be hypocritical to pretend I did. I remembered God in the woods and thought to myself, since I've already seen God, who needs Christ? I can love God without him, despite him. I don't need Christ at all. After this, there arose in me a great determination to love God, a resolution that brought me great joy, and with this I continued home. She remembers the Jewish people and their beautiful singing in the synagogue across the street from the church. I thought of all the Jewish people who had not believed in Christ, yet they knew God, loved God, led good lives, went to church, prayed, did everything we did, only without Christ. It seemed to me that, in the deepest sense, I was really Jewish. I had to be. Jesus, after all, was a Jew. If someone really wanted to be like Jesus, he too would have to be a Jew. This made sense to me. I liked the idea. If I had been older, I would have gone to the synagogue and never gone back to church. From this time on, I always thought of myself as a secret Jew. So, struggling with her faith, asking her father theological questions, she asks him, well, what about the Trinity? He might as well have said, don't bother to think about the Trinity, because you can't. Since he was up on every other theological doctrine, I'll never know why he was not up on the very one that had priority over all others. For without the Trinity, Christianity makes no sense at all. His rather easy dismissal of the Trinity was regrettable because I too dismissed it as unthinkable and never gave it a thought. This omission, I am convinced, left a big gap in my ability to come to terms with Christ and my Christian faith. Here's a couple of pictures of her, ages 10 and 11. Her father tells her something which he got from Saint Teresa of Avila, that the love of God was not a feeling or an emotion, but a strong will to love God. It's in the will. Still, I got hold of something that became the mainstay of my life, namely, true love of God is a will to God. Simple as that. Love of God is not in our heads, not a matter of emotions or feelings. Rather, it is the will, that powerhouse of the soul, our life's very energy focused on God. That alone was true love of God, nothing else. I went on to discover that in its deepest sense, the will is not primarily the faculty of desire for anything known, but rather the desire for something unknown, an innate longing for something that lies beyond ourselves, a longing for something we know is missing to us. So now she's 11, I think? Yeah, 11. Thank you for your patience. There's so much in here I'm skipping over. I'm reading a lot this time, I realize. But this is my favorite book in the whole entire world. There's a funny story about the school across the street got out a half hour earlier, and some kids were taunting her and her classmates playing on the playground and saying, "You Catholics, you're what is it, cat lickers," and all kinds of calling them names. And Bernadette, much younger than the boys, says, "If any of you would like to discuss or debate our religion, instead of calling us stupid names, meet me after school at the gate." Although about a dozen kids heard me, I never expected any of them to wait until our school was out. Thus, I was surprised after school to find 5 boys waiting at the gate. And so she's walking home with them, and they go into a Protestant church, and they say, she says, "See, there's a picture of Christ. It's just, you don't worship that picture, do you?" Because they're accusing Catholics of worshiping idols and things. So much good stuff in here. Okay, we'll end age 12 like this. She's in a procession at school, as she often is, and something she's seen many times before just kind of took her in a new way. I turned my head to see the Blessed Sacrament coming down the side aisle. Under the baldachin carried by the Knights of Columbus, wrapped in his elegant stole, the priest's face was hidden behind the large monstrance. On seeing the Blessed Sacrament, I was caught up in such an onrush of exultation and joy. It was a touch of heaven, God's presence so palpable it filled the church. I looked upward and saw what looked like a gray cloud of incense hovering overhead, and for a moment forgot where I was. I wished I could have died then. It was a taste of glory. Having to stay on earth struck me as terrible. In a lifetime of experience this was unique because it did not involve me at all. I was caught up in the immense oneness of everyone and everything in God, caught up in the glorious end that awaits us all. The experience was also unique because it was the only one that ever produced tears, caught by surprise, overwhelmed by glory. I lost my voice as well. While I never had the slightest fear of death, from here on I looked forward to it because now I knew what it would be like. Of this, I never had a doubt. Here's a picture of her, age 14, with one of her dogs. I think I told you guys the funny story of her going around baptizing all the neighborhood dogs so they could get to heaven too. I have to skip over a lot, obviously. They go on another road trip, and she goes up to the top of a hill, enters a chapel. She doesn't know what kind of chapel it is, and she kneels down in front of the Blessed Sacrament and loses all track of time. I could hardly believe I'd been in the chapel over 3 hours. It seemed no more than an hour. When I got down the hill and could see the front of the church, I saw two solitary figures